You brought up misgivings about the election, and you are credited with being one of the people who was in Trump's ear saying it was stolen from you. You really believe the election was stolen from Trump?
I think that the 2020 November election was filled with fraud, and there's all kinds of evidence that shows that, Chris. I mean, it's undeniable now. Now, whether or not we go back to the way things were then, we can't go back at this point. We have to move this country forward. We have to. But there is a ton of fraud that has been brought.
But how can there be a ton when True the Vote, which all you guys were relying on, Schlapp and everybody else, comes out in court and says, we don't have the proof. We don't have the proof. And the videos, but we saw the people. No, you didn't see anything. The people who were moving around the ballots, that video wasn't what you made it out to be. Why say there was fraud when no fraud has been proven?
And I'm going to be playing more from that exchange between former CNN host, current News Nation host Chris Cuomo, and former National Security Advisor, if you could possibly imagine this, to the President of the United States at the time, Donald Trump, and that's Michael Flynn. And he is a full QAnon guy now. And this is the type of person that Trump will bring back into a second term administration, so another reason to vote against him. But there we've been following, some on the bonus show, some in segments for the entire audience, sort of the fall from grace of Chris Cuomo. But on this issue, he's absolutely pressing Michael Flynn correctly. So that's good to see, because one of the other recent stories was him strangely alluding to this idea that there was some sort of cover up when it comes to ivermectin, or that there were lies being told or misinformation being pushed by the mainstream media on ivermectin not being effective, even though now that we've learned more about ivermectin and its efficacy on COVID specifically, which is what he's referring to, actually it is not effective. And it's just a strange moment there. And then he's gotten to this really sort of both sidesy, enlightened centrist, downplaying the significance of the threat of MAGA by equating it to extremism on the left that, as I always say, exists but doesn't make itself to positions of power like MAGA does in Republican politics. And so here, again, getting away from the fall from grace is actually a really good example of him shutting down the nonsense of Michael Flynn here and his election denying. Before saying more, I'll play the rest of this exchange. While you're watching, please make sure you are subscribed to this YouTube channel.
Well, one of the things that I do talk about in the movie is a guy that you just brought up is Mike Pence. I talk quite a bit about Mike Pence, actually, and raised this issue of where he stood in the early days of the Trump administration, and then as things evolved, what was the role of what I call the establishment, right? The establishment is not just Democrats, it's Republicans as well. I think that what we're going to have to do with the 2020 election, it's going to get washed out in history, and there is clear evidence. I don't know about True the Vote, but I'm looking at a whole bunch of other things that are going on in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona. There's just too much, and what it does is it takes away the idea of the confidence that the American people need to have in our vote. I mean, that's the one thing that makes us equal.
And of course, the most significant cause of people's doubts in our elections comes from Trump, the MAGA movement, and this election denying. This is not based on actual evidence-based concerns when it comes to our elections, but instead lies meant to serve Donald Trump's narrative that he couldn't have possibly lost the last election, and if he loses this election to Joe Biden, that also wasn't fair. But you'll notice there, Chris Cuomo essentially goes through and says even some of these organizations that you previously would have been applauding, when they actually have to go into court, they can't defend their claims. They make a lot of money making movies based on these election lies and going on tours, doing events where they talk a bunch about these election lies, writing books. But when it comes to actually presenting evidence where it matters, they are unable to do it. They have to admit they have nothing. And the response from Michael Flynn is, I don't know about True the Vote, but you just see it everywhere. It's all over the place. And this gets to the way that conspiracy theorists work and the way that these narratives are able to prevail, which is that you make enough claims, vastly enough, about enough elements of a given subject and sort of point the finger in enough directions where it's hard for even fact checkers who do have the facts on their side to go through and explain how every single little claim was false. And so in conversations with election deniers, often you'll notice that they'll respond to you debunking one idea by going, okay, well, what about blank? What about the suitcase of votes in Georgia that I saw on security footage? And if you don't know about the particular example, then it seems like maybe you're not in the right, even though it's impossible to know about every single conspiracy theory and every single thing they cite, that when you do actually look into it and you have some time to dive into, as Chris Cuomo was saying, these examples they will cite of suitcases of ballots or improper uses about, they're never what the original right-wing narrative purported them to be. And that's why instead of citing, oh, well, thanks for asking, Chris, what I'm referring to is an analysis that was done by this organization that found the amount of fraudulent votes in the state of Georgia was this, and here's the sources that back this up, and here's the investigation that was done by the blah, blah, blah. But instead it's, I just see a lot of stuff all over the place. Surely if I'm seeing this many stories in this many states, there has to be something. No, but see, there's a whole cottage industry now of pumping out those stories. So it's going to seem like there's a lot of them. Doesn't mean there actually is. Now, we've obviously gone through the election denying conversation so many times. So let me get us away from just that part of the conversation and emphasize that there's something else going on here, which is, yes, we're experiencing the deterioration of our democracy. And that starts with these lies. It gets to using lies as justification for things like what Trump tried to do in 2020 and 2021 in trying to block the peaceful transfer of power. Who knows what it would lead to? We have an idea, and it's frightening. In a second Trump term, in the open authoritarianism that often has to start somewhere. And it can start with, well, the Democrats stole the election, so now we have justification to do all sorts of wild authoritarian things. And so that threat to democracy does really premise itself on these election lies. But there's something else that makes it so important to continue talking about, highlighting, emphasizing the liars like Michael Flynn and the lies specifically that are being told about elections and their inability to provide evidence ever to back them up, which is that this also represents the unraveling of a common dedication to basic facts. Because in times gone by, it's not that there weren't elements of what we experience now where it's not really that you're disagreeing on opinion, but you genuinely disagree what the fact of the matter is. And that has existed before. But there used to be more of, in part because of the media landscape, social media, and other characteristics of this current political moment, there used to be more of a common understanding of certain basic facts, like elections. People generally understood elections to be legitimate, and that's why we saw time and time again until Trump the peaceful transfer of power with little resistance. And now on this issue and others, we're seeing that, especially because of the new characteristics, like I said, the introduction of social media, the incentive structures changing, and the new way that you can make a very profitable business around pumping out just ideological material, regardless of the factual nature of it, is especially bad in right-wing media. You see it some in left-wing media for sure, and that's frightening across the board, but it's really, really bad right now in right-wing media. And I think people like, or entities like Fox News really led on creating this new type of media output. And so what we're seeing here is now you can create a bubble and a world for a population of people to live in that maybe has some facts. They might agree the sky is blue and some other things, but also can just create a reality around them. And once you have that, then any fact check from an organization that used to be thought of as credible or legitimate, any investigation done by, again, a legitimate organization that's tasked with understanding the legitimacy of our elections, any of these forums in which we would previously say if it can be found to be true or false here, we'll all agree to it. The outcome of an election-related court case, if we can analyze that, all of that can be identified as just liberal nonsense. And then you're sort of unbeatable in an argument in this strange way, which is to say that your facts can be sort of manufactured in this right-wing media echo chamber, and then you don't have to worry so much about actually backing up these claims with evidence. And again, it's not just a MAGA problem, but it's particularly bad in the MAGA world. And so my warning to those who are not in MAGA media is don't fall into that and continue forward with a stronger dedication to facts. Moving from that, the scary thing that we're seeing now is this preparation for election lies in 2024 in the November election. And so here is Greg Gutfeld admitting he doesn't have evidence, but preparing to say that the 2024 election is going to be stolen.
I'm worried about what we don't see. What are the Democrats cooking up with the votes? Legal or illegal? Judging by your ears or your eyes, this election should not even be close. So the Dems have two options. One, accept the outcome, be comforted by the fact that you got one Biden term, a deal with a dementia-ridden devil, or resort to electoral dirty tricks. And that's why we need the utmost transparency, because I fear the Dems will go the second route. Although I have very little evidence on that, but that hasn't stopped me before.
They haven't done any of that.
No, never, not at all.
Never.
We won the last election.
One.
We have to win so big you can't rig.
Yes,
Which is
win
what Trump
so
said.
Yeah. So it's really frightening. And I've had people writing in to the show, reaching out to me, because polls don't look great, to be honest, right now. They at least aren't exactly comfortable where we would love them to be. People are concerned, understandably, and losing faith in America, I guess. Losing faith in our common fellow man and woman. And I feel that. I get that. I think the only recourse is to go out there, be active, care, engage, and encourage others to do the same in favor of democracy, in favor of the truth. But yeah, I'm disturbed too. Now we have this whole media world that's prepping to claim the election was stolen. And the reason why that's so significant is last time we saw the damage that was done by Trump in the lead up to his election and afterwards claiming the election was stolen. It took right-wing media a second to push that aggressively. It was sort of after the election that they really started leaning into that. Now they're on board with doing this months before. So the ideas that will be embedded in the viewers' brains it's going to be so deep, because it's going to have been there for so long. And that means that the impact could be that much greater. And that is scary. And the only solution is staying engaged. Because if that makes you scared and frightened and makes you want to disengage, you're just giving more power. Every person who disengages, who's in favor of democracy, in favor of being truthful about that democracy, etc., every one of that type of person who disengages gives more power to someone who is not dedicated to those common principles and is staying engaged. And I will say on the polling question, we've gotten bad polling out recently. I think it was from the New York Times. Yeah, it was. And here, Joe Scarborough did make a really good point about maybe the hype that is heard around the world every time a bad poll for Biden comes out is a little bit wonky.
I love the Times, Mika. I read the Times. And of course, especially because Peter Baker writes for the Times. I want you to take him down after I say this next thing. But the New York Times Siena poll traditionally has consistently slanted toward Donald Trump. And what's so funny is the Times will release their polls. Liberals will run around with their hair on fire for about a month, right? And then like 3 days later, polls will come out that will show a deadlocked race, right? If anybody wants to bet me, I can't bet. I don't bet. Betting's for stupid. But if I were a bettor, and if somebody wanted to give me 11 or 12 points, and Biden in Nevada, come on. That race is always close, and Democrats always win the close races, except for the governor. Democrats always win the close race. If anybody out there believes it's a double-digit lead for Donald Trump, you're seriously wake up. And it's the same thing. They're all tied. You know, we can show you polls that show Pennsylvania, Biden ahead, Wisconsin, Biden.
So we've said it so many times, especially tomorrow I'll be collaborating with Josiah from Pondering Politics, and he and I get on this a lot, which is the asymmetry of expectations and just the fact that there's way more panic. There's more attention given to bad news for Democrats, it seems sometimes, because it almost seems like that's not the norm. Yeah, of course, bad things are going to be in the news constantly about Trump, but when something bad is about Biden, oh my goodness, we have to talk so much about it. And it's the chance to sort of prove that we're equal. See, we talk about both. And so what happens is when you do see a negative poll for Biden, it's constant coverage, but it is significant and frightening. But also, we have our nominees essentially. We know what the election's going to be in terms of who's matching up against who. And that means there's not much that comes of hyperventilating. Instead, just each bad poll is another motivation to go out there and, again, engage and convince others to vote. And I'll leave you on this. I've had a bunch of recent conversations. I did not realize how long this segment has gone. By the way, if you're wondering, things look a little different behind me. I am in a different location as I'm preparing to move to DC, a little intermediary location. But I have been having a bunch of conversations with people who probably weren't going to vote or would have voted their party, or who knows, just sort of up in the air. And it's actually pretty easy to get them from that to, okay, I should vote for Biden. Explaining the record of Trump, his intentions for second term, the threat to our democracy. And it just takes talking with them. So when I say engage, just find one person, two people in your life who you know are just a little bit, not far right MAGA people. That's going to be a waste of effort. Instead, I mean, unless you really want to go for that, wish you the best. But more efficiently, you could spend your time just trying to get those people who are disengaged, because so many people are not engaged, and convince them to make sure they go vote. And maybe they can even get someone else to do it as well. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments. You can watch another recent video as I smack my mic by clicking up there.